All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome to our live Pride event where we'll be discussing Giallo and the origins of metal through the movies of Black Sabbath from 1963 by Mario Bava, a big favorite of Kelly and I's, and Dario Argento's Phenomenon from 1985. But we also have a super special guest to join us tonight to talk about to not only talk about these two movies and the origins of horror and metal, but to also talk about their feature short length film that's going to be coming out, Bath Bomb. We're your host, Kelly, a longtime metal and horror fan, and myself, who's also a metal horror fan, but also a big anime nerd. And you guys know us as the Spinsters of Horror. Oh my God, I almost said horror podcast, Kelly.
It's still new.
It's
It's all
still
right.
new.
We're still
It's still
getting used to
changing.
it. Yes.
We are a monthly podcast called I Spit on Your Podcast, where we discuss horror, cult, and subversive cinema with thoughtful analysis, research, and passion. And guess what, guys? You know this. We are very passionate about metal. Way back in the day, we did a whole, yeah, exactly, heavy MTL. We did a whole episode on horror and metal back in the early days of the podcast when we did Todd and the Book of Pure Evil. Remember that, guys? That was a lot of fun. So, when our guests approached us to collaborate on something about metal and horror and also Giallo, because for some reason everyone are huge Giallo fans. So I thought this is perfect. We need to talk about this because we also like Giallo horror movies. So we were thrilled. So Kelly, would you like to introduce our guest for us tonight?
I would. So this is Colin. So Colin is an acclaimed director, editor, and occasional producer based in Toronto, Canada. Hey, where I'm from. Primarily known for his music video work, he has developed an eclectic style through collaborations with a diverse selection of artists, including Grammy-nominated singer-songwriter Jesse Reyes, dark electronic sensation Rez, post-hardcore legends Under Oath and Silverstein, and many, many more. His music videos have been recognized by major mainstream awards institutions, including a 2017 iHeartRadio MMVA win for Best Hip Hop Video, and nominations from the Berlin MVAs, the Kinsale Sharks, and others. His work has also been featured by numerous prominent entertainment publications like Loudwire, Spin, Alternative Press, Exclaim, XXL, Paper Nylon, and many more. So Jess and I get many requests and emails and posts on our website about, hey, I got a new book coming out. Do you want to review it? Hey, maybe I can be on your podcast. And they're generic, to be honest with you. But when you, Colin, reached out to us, it was a very detailed, well-researched, very personal and interesting kind of shout out and an inquiry. And the thing that really stood out to me is that you and I are kindred spirits. And you had sent this photo of of yourself over at the old Helveti basement. So this is like the origins of second wave of black metal, Norwegian black metal over in Norway. So here we both are in the same basement. So I was just like really impressed. Jess was really impressed. We're like, we need to get together with this person. And so here we are getting together with you. So thank you so much for joining us. How are you?
I'm good. Thanks for having me. I'm actually wearing the same t-shirt I'm wearing in that photo. I just realized.
Oh my God, that's amazing.
There it is. So we got a couple little warm-up questions, and then we'll get more into, Giallo, metal, horror, and your upcoming super interesting short, Bath Bomb. So our first question to get us all kind of in the mood, what drew you to both the macabre in film and in music, Colin?
Well, there's a couple of parts to it, I guess. I got most of my spooky interests come from my mom. She's growing up. She was obsessed with Stephen King and Edgar Allan Poe. We had this bookshelf that was hers, where she had every Stephen King hardcover, dating back to when he was still Richard Bachman, and she had these really beautiful illustrated everything that of Poe, and I started reading all that stuff when I was pretty young, like in early elementary school. She got me into spooky stuff. But I was like an academic nerd, like going down the science and math route of life
Mhm.
until and I thought, you know, movies were kind of just for entertainment and had no other value to anyone. And then I watched in 1997. I saw Lost Highway,
Oh,
the
okay.
David Lynch movie, and that simultaneously got me interested in film and heavy music because it had the soundtrack was produced by Trent Reznor, and it had, you know, Rammstein and Nine Inch Nails and Marilyn
Right.
Manson and a bunch
Mm.
of other dark stuff on there that I then
Mm.
obsessively sought out.
I see. So that was that moment where we're like, oh, metal and heavy music and dark cinema really go well together.
Hmm. Yeah, well, it started with the dark cinema element, but then the
Yeah.
heavy music was in as well. And then there's all these. If you start down that path, you see all these coincidences of all those crossovers, and
Mm-hmm.
every artist that you love has worked with every other artist that you love in both
Mm.
cinema and music. And yeah.
Yeah. I love that your mom was a big influence, parental figure for your spookiness. My parents weren't that for the spookiness, but they were for metal. My dad is a
Oh.
massive metal fan, and he has been. Well, he definitely, I mean, obviously he's like 63, 64 now. So he started with really like almost the proto metal stuff, right? He was like that, the classic rock. He was into like the Rush and Led Zeppelin and Deep Purple and all of that stuff. And then obviously he was into Black Sabbath. 80s got into hair metal and stuff like that. But I'm growing up as a teenager and every weekend hearing this like bombastic, aggressive music coming from the basement. And I was either going to go the route of, I hate this or I'm going to love it. And obviously I went through the route of, I love it.
Which is absolutely kind of hilarious because, as everyone knows, Kelly was a big influence on me because I didn't grow up with metal music or horror. It was they were both no-nos in my household, strict Roman Catholic household, so that was not allowed. Like I think the hardest music or the rock music that I got to was like Def Leppard or
Yeah.
like the mainstream stuff. So when I met
Yeah.
Kelly in my early 20s is when she was just like, oh, sliding in some symphonic gothic metal in there. So she, Kelly, sliding into my DMs, Kelly just sliding in all the different, horror music elements. And then over time,
Yeah.
she started influencing my horror journey. So like Kelly, yeah, you're like truly like my older sister to like
Yeah. Yeah.
changed me in that way.
Influencing you passively and aggressively at the same
Yeah,
time.
exactly.
Okay. And then since it's Pride Month and we're all kind of here for this interesting question, and Jess and might be able to, you know, say something to this as well. But because as women, being a horror fan, a metal fan, and then both of them, like there's been some challenges and struggles there. But how has being a queer metal horror fan affected you, or has it not? Like, what's your experience been like? And I hope positive, but
I think that kind of all three of those things just fit into a general feeling of being weird or like
yeah,
otherness. And
yeah,
to be honest, I mean, none of them have ever caused controversy. I don't think it until pretty recently. For one thing, I pass as straight most of the time, so
right,
I don't. It's not like I shake people's hand and say, "Oh, I'm Colin and I'm queer." So
yeah,
it's usually people who know me well that even know that I'm queer. And
right,
it's never been an issue because I've always been in those types of social circles anyway. But when we started doing the crowdfunding campaign for Bath Bomb, this is the first time that I ever saw just kind of hilarious backlash. We would, on our social media accounts, like our Instagram and our Facebook, and also on our Indiegogo campaign, we were getting like daily homophobic comments. Like if you go on
Whoa.
our Indiegogo campaign right now, the entire comment section is
What?
comment has been removed by Indiegogo because they're
Oh
just
my
all
goodness.
just ridiculous. And the funny thing is that I always kind of considered the other two communities, like the horror community and the metal community, to be very like supportive internally. But we pushed that campaign specifically to the horror community, and I was pretty surprised to see a lot of homophobia in response from that community. I mean, a lot is maybe an overstatement. It was a lot, but in comparison to the total number of people that were seeing it, it's not a lot probably, but I was surprised nonetheless. It was pretty interesting.
Yeah. I mean, if you're removing more than one comment, that's a lot. That's a lot. That's too much.
And I mean, it's like a couple dozen. So, and on Instagram, it was like daily, and it would range everything from like somebody presenting you a way too long argument of like why Giallo doesn't need to be queer, versus the other end of the spectrum, which is somebody who just commented, "I hope you die."
Oh my gosh!
Right. I love that you're laughing, and I'm like,
maybe wasn't even homophobic. Maybe they just don't like Giallo. I don't know, because
they just don't like you.
It just said, I don't know. I hope you die. Like, oh, okay.
Well, we do know that typically metal music and Italian horror, Giallo, and Kelly and I have experienced this in the past. There is a bit of gatekeeping with older men in the community. Like they tend to be like, this is sacred. Like this is how it is. Even though like I could watch any Argento film and be like, God, this is gorgeous. Like of course someone this would speak to queerness and stuff like that because of the color, the lighting, like everything is an aesthetic, right? You got to really picture that as you're going with it. So it's just like, and like you said, horror, metal, like it's all, we're othered. We are the outsiders. We don't conform to the regular ways of, or what the regular ways of social life is, or so I think it's interesting that people like are I guess I like, because Kelly and I have like really integrated ourselves into more of the queer community with the horror genre and stuff like that. I always get shocked sometimes when I hear people outside like making comments like that towards horror movies and stuff like that. I would notice that, I haven't noticed that too much in the metal community, but I'm also very much quieter, so I don't necessarily.
I think also it's like there's a correlation between the type of person who's likely to leave comments anyway. Tends to be those type of people. Because also I mentioned in the original email chain, but I also since 2016 have been involved in a pretty big metal festival in the States called Psycho Las Vegas that mostly caters to not like radio metal, but like niche. Metal. And it's a hugely inclusive crowd in general. The festival is super inclusive, and there's a ton of queer folks, and we've had a lot of queer artists, and there's never been any sort of like anti-queer sentiment that I've ever felt in the festival community itself, or even on any of our social pages, et cetera, et cetera. So, but I'm sure it's out there. It's just that, those people aren't necessarily vocal until you give them an opportunity to be, and then
great
using
point.
that anonymity of the screen. I can say this from the screen.
That made sense on like the Indiegogo thing, but like on Instagram, I can click on your account.
That's true.
That is true. It's like, I can see all
made up, but often those people on Instagram have not hidden anything, and they're almost even proud of it. They're like, dude, get a hobby. I don't know.
All right. Well, the next question I have is one that when I was sitting down watching Black Sabbath, and then I was thinking about some other metal music I listened to, more tapping into people's emotions. So, and I always like to hear other people's responses to this, because I obviously I'm very empathetic and I get quite emotional. But why do you think both metal music and also horror have a way of tapping into people's emotions, especially when you combine them both?
I mean, I think it goes back to the joint origins of the two of them. Like, I don't want to get into like the super nerdy conversation of how metal started.
Let's do this.
I think everybody who is cool, I'm kidding, agrees that metal kind of became metal with Black Sabbath, and the song Black Sabbath in particular. And because that song was directly inspired or created as a response to Geezer Butler and Ozzy being curious about people's willingness to pay to be frightened, which is, based on them having seen lineups for that film. That curiosity is attached to the emotional response that you get from horror movies, and the fact that it's attached to like your basic survival instincts, etc. And so they tried to create music that purposely tapped into those same emotions that through the lyrical content and the sound of the music itself was connected to basic instincts of survival, etc. So I think that, if that's what was the foundation that everybody was building upon, then it makes sense that you get a strong emotional response because it was designed that way.
Love that.
Yeah, I love that too. Because like I said, I bring that up because like I know there's certain metal songs that I listen to. I've never listened to metal music that has scared me. It's always been intriguing, and it's always been like I can see the imagery and the visuals that come up in mind and stuff like that. But I always find with metal music, the emotions that come up is those like yeah, let's fucking do this, let's rock. Or sometimes I get like emotional. I'm just like I think I'm gonna cry because this is like hitting a nerve. And one of the examples is November Doom's "What We Become." Every time I hear that song, it's just like boom, tears. Don't know why, but it happens.
Death Doom is good for that depressing shit, that's for sure. To kind of get
Well-
you in that dark, dreary, having a cup of tea, it's storming, there's a tornado watch. You're just like feeling the atmosphere and the vibes of deep, dark depression and despair. So
sometimes the live experience is a lot different though than the album experience, because sometimes songs that are really sad, if you're in a crowd of people who are feeling it the same way as you are, you feel like elated in a way because you're sharing that with other people.
For sure. Yeah, definitely. I've had different experiences at shows with music, whereas I listen to it at home and then I'm seeing them live performing. I'm just like, oh, this has hit a whole other emotion, and I love it because you're also feeding off of the energy of the crowd, which can be the same with horror movies, right? When you go and see a scary movie in theaters, you're feeding off the energy of the crowd, and you're also getting scared and amped up. But usually when you're by yourself, it's kind of a little less like you have different emotions that come with it. Like you're more just afraid to walk down your really super dark hallway at night by yourself.
I was going to say it becomes a cathartic experience often when you do experience horror in a group or experience metal within the group. Like, yeah, you're right. It could be very somber and quiet of an experience, but big and kind of revelatory when you see it live. No, that was also a really great point. I need to go to a metal show. It's been so long.
Yes.
I know.
Sometimes the bands too, when they're live, it becomes frightening when it wasn't on the album. Sometimes because of what they bring to the live show, but again, because you're sharing it with people, it's like frightened in a good way. I'm hoping that I get the act right. It's an act we had at Psycho one year. They brought pig's blood on stage and we're throwing it on the. I think it was Watain.
Oh yeah, so I was gonna say I know Watain very.
And that was like, I had listened to them a lot and never thought it was particularly frightening, but it's frightening when you're there. But then everybody else is, it's like, oh, it's okay that we're scared. So you're like,
Well,
now that fire and blood and pigs' heads all around. I've never seen their show with the animal heads because for whatever reason they just don't have it here. Because I don't know why in Canada, at least in Toronto, they've never brought that much of their props. Couldn't get it. Short notice. I don't know. It's hard I don't know. But
do it even in the States, right? It's hard for them to do that stuff anywhere. But
yeah.
That's those bands. It's hard for them to even get,
to us.
That's true.
Last year we did, we went pretty heavy into black metal, and the only reason that some of those bands like Mayhem, the only reason that they toured North America after that is because the lawyers for Psycho got them visas, which was like a really difficult process, like a multi-year long process to get them into the country.
Yeah,
that's true. It's theatrics, right? Like when you're going and seeing a live performance, they're bringing their A game, so they want to give you that experience. And we all know, like that, really, with like Alice Cooper did the same thing when later on with their theatrics of his show and stuff like that. And it's like when we also know, very horror inspired, very from the origins of horror and metal there.
Yeah, I mean his shows, back in the day, he was probably the first mainstream artist that that was selling out like arenas that had like a horror movie experience on stage, because he did like the thing where he'd decapitate himself with a guillotine.
Yeah.
Like it was like watching a horror movie
Yeah.
Oh, that's yeah. I
So
think the
fun.
closest I've come to like that is like I've been to a black metal show here in Ottawa, and I'm pretty sure it was Dark Funeral. And and I guess it was really my first time seeing corpse paint live, like seeing actual. So I was just like, whoa! Like I'm so used to seeing it on the internet. So that was like, I was like, okay, I'm a little unnerved right now. I don't know where the energy of the show is gonna go.
Yeah.
All right. So you've brought it up a couple times, and so let's talk about your new project, Bath Bomb, and answer the question: why Giallo?
Yeah. So I watched before I knew what Giallo was. I had seen a number of Giallo films. It wasn't until I was in film school that term was thrown around, and there was like I went to school at UBC in their film production program, and they had a course on auteur cinema. And one year they did, it's always two auteurs, and they're comparing and contrasting. And one year they had Cronenberg and Argento. And so we watched, like Deep Red and Tenebrae, and then also like post Giallo Argento, like Suspiria and Inferno. And there was, especially with the stuff that was explicitly labeled Giallo, they felt really queer to me. Like a movie like Deep Red has, considering when it was made, half the cast are queer. I mean, half the characters, not necessarily the cast. And it had a kind of sensitive, again, for the time, portrayal of queer characters. Like there's a trans character in that movie that's a positive portrayal, except for, I mean, some people find it offensive that it was a female actress, but then trying to masculinize them with like a fake mustache and then having a male dub the voice for the female actress. Some people find that offensive, but again, considering the time is pretty sensitive. And so I was kind of convinced that it was queer. And then when I watched more Giallo, there's just a ton of queerness in them. Again, even just the number of characters that are queer. And even when it is bad, like the typical villainizing a lesbian character is like tempting a straight woman away from the proper path. It was so common. And these characters were they weren't just side characters. They're always pivotal to the plot, even if they were the villain. That it really surprised me that they were all made by people that were ostensibly heterosexual. And so I felt like if Giallo was going to have a resurgence, which I think it should anyway, because, slasher happened, which was just Americans taking all the flamboyant elements out of Giallo and making it about the slasher himself. You don't go to see those movies because of the protagonist. You go to see them for whoever the slasher is, whether it's Jason or Michael or Freddy or whatever. Since that's, they did that, it seems like it should come back with the flamboyant elements return. And why not have it kind of owned by queer filmmakers, since it connects with that audience so much. Like even, everybody calls the contrasting pink, purple, blue, red lighting bisexual lighting.
Yes.
Even though it was created by Mario Bava, and he was not bisexual, and he just did it to look spooky. Like there's even back in that time there were texts on color coding lighting in film, and there's actually a popular one that the title of the book is if it's purple, someone's gonna die. And it's like, so before anybody was considering sexual orientation, those things were coded for other reasons that have to do with horror. So it was just makes sense that queer people would bring back Giallo. So
I think we're ready for it. I love that you said that there's time for a resurgence. And sorry, Jess, I'm not a massive fan of Giallo. How dare you say that earlier? I'm
Gothic.
There's some that I like, but afterwards, I'd love a list of some recommendations because they don't usually hit well with me. But I agree. Maybe it's time to make this more modern, make this more contemporary. Let's like just do this, because I think there are a lot of really interesting elements of Giallo that I like. And just sometimes execution doesn't really work for me so much. Maybe I need to look at.
There's a lot of them recently. There's been a resurgence, or at least the term has been thrown around a lot. Like Last Night in Soho was intended as a love letter to Giallo, and the way that it was shot. And the murder mystery element of it is very Giallo. And
interesting.
Malignant was James Wan's version of Giallo, and it's very Giallo. Even the plot, just in a bananas, over the top James Wan sort of way. And I mean, pretty much supposed slasher movies that do not focus on the slasher and are more a murder mystery where one of the protagonist social circle is the killer, and you're just trying to solve who the killer is, and it's always like rooted in something Freudian. Those are more Giallo than they are slasher. So like Scream is Giallo, is as much as anybody wants to call it the slasher.
Interesting.
Giallo. Especially if you've seen Black Sabbath. The short in Black Sabbath that is Giallo is Il Telefono, the first one, and that's Scream. It's
he's on the phone.
The phone, reveals that he can see her. That's the first time that happened in cinema. It turns out it's actually a friend disguising their voice. Like it's that's all
right. Oh, it's so true.
That is a fantastic point. Love that.
Yeah, and I was just thinking too, because there was another film that we saw last year. Kelly and I talk about it a lot, Knife and Heart.
So that's Plus Heart. Yeah,
Knife Plus Heart. Thank you.
Giallo. That is
exactly.
Giallo. Yeah, and that's what's his face, Jan Gonzalez, who is the brother of I'm forgetting his first name, but M83, the band M83, is really just one dude, and he did the score for Knife and Heart because his brother's the writer. Cool. Yeah, that's an actual Giallo. That's on purpose was a Giallo, but
definitely.
Yes, absolutely. But it was, I don't want to say but. I was gonna say it was so, I think, fantastic, and that one sat really nicely with me. I thought it was pretty incredible. So before jumping into Black Sabbath, what kind of elements of Giallo that you like are you bringing into Bath Bomb?
Yeah, the visual language of it mostly, because there was a lot of cool shit in the visual language that slasher took, which is still cool, but they didn't take all of it. Like the killer's POV, that's from Giallo, and that's obviously big in slasher. But there was a lot of cool elements that people just don't do anymore. And it was when we were shooting this, in order to recreate some of them, it was difficult because some of the gear that doesn't even exist anymore. One thing that gets used sometimes, because other big filmmakers like Scorsese used to do this, but something called a split diopter shot, which is where you have like two focal planes in the same shot divided by like a blurred border in the middle. We use that in Bath Bomb. We shot Bath Bomb, so everything is all the
we
things
can talk about it.
We're gonna do have been done. Using just like completely unnecessary use of reflections where there doesn't need to be a reflection in the shot, and you just have one in there. We did that a bunch. Context zooms are things people don't do anymore because technology like Steadicams sort of took them away. But it's like starting a scene on a very tight close-up of an object that's later going to be important in the scene, and as the scene unfolds, you just slowly zoom out, revealing the context of what's going on in the scene. So we did. The Bath Bomb opens with a really long context zoom from like the play button on a reel-to-reel player as the killer presses it, and it zooms out, revealing the entire room, and then continues to zoom out the door of the room until you're like in a frame within a frame of the room.
Cool.
Using compound framing to show people who are like trapped or was super common in Giallo. We used kind of an updated version of bisexual lighting.
Ooh, updated.
It's updated. Dare we say elevated? Oh God.
Never. Using like revealing information in using inserts and having entire exchanges between people that are only inserts was something that was common in Giallo that we did. And I wish more people did it, because it's such a clever way to limit the information that you're doling out to the audience. Smash zooms. We got smash zooms for
Oh my
fun.
God. How long is your short? It sounds like it's long. Sounds like it's a long one.
It's 5 minutes, but every shot.
It's 5 minutes. Wow.
Every shot is
wow. It sounds incredible.
Meticulously. Oh, now I like. Well, obviously, I really want to see it, but I'm like, now I really want to see it. Like, that's all you did in 5 minutes.
Sounds cheeky and interesting. Yeah.
And then it might end up being like 7 once we. I haven't edited it, so it's 5 on the page. It's a 5-page script, but we'll see what happens when it's edited.
Cool.
Wow.
All right, we're going to jump into the last 30 minutes. We're going to get into the movies. Again, more metal. But going back to Black Sabbath, they have some really interesting things to say about that. And we could talk about this forever. And Giallo, I want to talk with you. Let's go have our coffee or a drink and talk about all this, because you're like my Giallo expert that I need to talk to. But we'll start with Black Sabbath. So what's your history with the band, with the movie? And when you saw it, is that when you kind of made the connection between like the Gothic and the metal and Giallo as a general kind of term had a connection? Like, what was what's your history with this?
So again, this is the connection there is something that predates my understanding of the term Giallo. And because it's an anthology film and only one of them is actually Giallo and the others are just Gothic horror. I was super obsessed with Black Sabbath for a long time. My dad introduced me to Black Sabbath and
the band.
Yeah.
This is going to be confusing.
No, sorry. Yeah. The band.
Yeah.
And I just thought it was cool that they got their name from a movie. And I didn't watch that movie, though, until I was in my 20s. It wasn't really that widely available until like a rip of it appeared on YouTube ages and ages ago. And then now, it's on, or it was on Shudder for a while. It's not anymore.
It's on Tubi.
Right. Yeah. I have it on Blu-ray as well.
I own it on DVD as well.
And then when I learned about the Giallo connection, it just like that was after I already was like into Giallo, so it just like expanded my love of Giallo.
Yeah. And you still a fan of Black Sabbath? The band?
A certain era of Black Sabbath.
Oh, scandaloso. Which era?
I mean, the first 3, potentially 4 albums of Black Sabbath. The first 3 Black Sabbath albums are not subjectively, they are objectively 3 of the greatest albums ever made. And the fourth kind of, but you could see it started to lose its, I think probably because losing Ozzy's commitment to the band versus his commitment to getting fucked up. And I don't have anything against Ronnie James Dio, but his era of the band is a little like a caricature of what was happening previously. But I do love him as a solo artist. And
I went back and downloaded and revisited the first 3 albums, and oh boy, it is quite an experience. And like every once in a while I'll go back to like some OG metal and kind of figure out, I love origins of stuff. Jess and I are doing like the origins of horror series through the podcast, and sometimes I do like to go to the OG like of subgenres. Like I often go back to like Venom and Sarcophago and Bathory when I want to do my like OG like black metal stuff. It's just really good to understand and know your roots. So going back to Black Sabbath always blows me away. And Sabbath Bloody Sabbath,
4th album.
Yes, was really enjoyed that one. But it's just, you can really, when you watch Black Sabbath the movie, which I rewatched, and is so wonderfully beautiful and creepy and atmospheric and macabre, and it all kind of makes sense. And like I often forget that Black Sabbath the band got their name from that movie, because I only watched Black Sabbath the movie like for the first time a couple of years ago. You're right, it wasn't so readily available. So it's just, it really makes a lot of sense that is the such an inspiration to create such an inspirational, iconic, legendary band.
Yeah, and people often argue in the super nerdy metal crowd that even though the first 3 albums are probably the best, that it wasn't until Sabbath, Bloody Sabbath, that they really started influencing genres other than doom metal. Because if you continue to listen to the discography, you can hear precursors to other subgenres within metal.
Interesting.
But the first 3 albums, which are essentially, even though they're kind of the first metal albums, period, they're doom metal.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
And I'm in my, I guess so Kelly would say, I'm in my doom metal phase right now with horror, and I absolutely love it. Like I think that's my genre of metal that I go to, because it's so,
I love doom, yeah.
I love doom metal, and I love how Sabbath was really able to like tap into like like they use the sounds and their texts and their covers and everything, that just the overall style to really tap into like the doom and gloom elements that are often found, and especially in a lot of early horror movies. Like that's what I love so much about rewatching Black Sabbath again and seeing those 3 stories. And like my 2 of my favorite stories is the last one, which is like the drop of water, and the middle one, which is the one with the Wardlock with the vampires. But like it's so gloomy and doom and stuff like that, and like you can just imagine you can hear all of a sudden like a Black Sabbath rip like coming up in your mind there. And like you said, like they often like go hand in hand with those elements of horror, the evil imagery, the occultism, Satanism, stuff like that. And there's even bands now that are referencing a lot of horror movies and folk horror movies. There's this one song that I particularly like called Angela, which is all about blood and Satan's claw. And I can't remember the band's name for the life of me, but I've been noticing that in a lot of the doom metal that I'm listening to, it's that more of that. Oh, I could see the horror imagery. I could see folk horror. I could see early Italian Gothic horror in its music. And that's what I love so much. And that's why I love the fact that I'm like so grateful that Ozzy and Tony decided to like change their name from the Polka Tulk Blues Band.
Well, actually, they were Earth first.
And Earth, yeah. Sorry, thank you. Polka Tulk Blues Band, and then the other guy's Earth, to Black Sabbath. Like, thank you. Thank you for marrying horror and metal together, because like Kelly and I, like we said, we talked about this before, metal shows up in so many of a lot of our favorite horror movies.
Do you know Windhand?
Windhand sounds familiar.
Oh yeah, Jess definitely knows who they are. You've talked about them. You've posted about them on our social media. Yeah. They have a really great like purple and white kind of like like flowing logo. Yeah, I've heard them.
They're my favorite like modern Strictly Doom band. And
yeah,
then
I like
do you know King Woman?
King Woman.
She's like doom with a bit of like grunge sensibility. She's like my favorite doom artist, period, right now. She's also a friend, but the
name drop.
It's not strictly doom. It's like doom with grungy.
Yeah. I love that. Jess, you'd probably be into her.
The short film The Runner that Boy Harsher directed. It's on Shudder. She stars in that as well.
Oh, okay. I have that on my watch list, so now it gets amped up.
There you go. King Woman and that movie you just said the name of, The Runner. To watch. Every time I do these, I was like in the background, be like, okay, watch list. Because
whenever I have a chance to promote Friends, you gotta promote.
I get it.
But friend or not, her album Celestial Blues from last year is like one of the best albums I've heard in a long time.
Celestial Blues.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Should move on to our next movie.
I was gonna say, do we have any other more comments that we want to say about like kind of Black Sabbath, the film itself?
I'm a time police. We should move on.
You should move on. Okay, Kelly's like, move on.
Yep.
No problem.
To get into the high octane, I'm gonna say balls to the wall, but the cunt to the wall. Sorry.
Oh my goodness.
Metal with like Motorhead, Iron Maiden, just like the high octane speed,
Well, we're moved into the 80s now. We're into the 80s,
Yes, exactly.
and we're now gonna discuss Argento's Phenomena from 1985. Starring the gorgeous Jennifer Connelly. I totally forgot that Donald Pleasance is in this movie, which I absolutely love him. But like Kelly said, it is like high octane. I feel different vibes, like completely different, but kind of high octane from the get go, because like you said, the first time in the film you hear Flash of the Blade, and yeah, Flash of the Blade throughout, and then you hear it in pieces throughout the film. And so I guess like one of my questions in terms of discussing this film, and a couple things that Kelly and I kind of read in preparation for this event, was how often metal gets included in horror movies to help with character development. I was kind of thinking of how I feel about that, because I feel like that's really strong in this film, is that metal is being used to really build the character up to the role that she plays in this film.
Yeah, well, it's interesting because it doesn't have that much of a personal connection in its two most obvious placements of that specific song, because it starts playing over the first, well, other than the opening kill, the first kill at the school.
Mm-hmm.
But when you cut to Jennifer Connelly's character in bed when she has her first like insect POV thing, it changes back to the Claudio Simonetti score.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's kind of more associated, I think, with the act of killing than it is with her specifically. And the Motorhead song is very randomly placed, kind of like, because
wheeling
when
a dead body out.
Oh, yeah, when they find dead bodies and we're like, Motorhead.
Metal and death. I mean, I get that too.
But the maiden track, the second time the maiden track comes in, that is really prominent, is when she's trying to escape from Dario Nicolodi's house.
Yeah.
And so that's more personal for sure. I think he was Argento. I mean, Argento had a lot of input into the score whenever he was working with Claudio Simonetti, who was, founding member of Goblin. And I think this was kind of like a precursor to opera, which I would say has a much stronger connection between metal and character development than this does. And actually, although in opera, the metal tracks in that are often credited to Claudio Simonetti. Like I think on Spotify and Apple Music, it says Claudio. It's not. It's Italian band called G-O-W, that took on the name Steel Grave for some reason for that movie. But definitely in that case, I would agree that it's really attached to character development.
It seems like you and I both are like ready.
Well,
ready.
Go
ahead, Jess.
Well, I was just like, I wanted to ask what your thoughts of, like, for the type of film that it was, why would they include like metal music? Like, why would they include two prominent bands like Iron Maiden and Motorhead?
Yeah, not to take any credit away from Argento creatively, but I wouldn't be surprised if it was because they were popular at the time in America.
Okay.
I mean, that's when he really dove into his, like, let's do what the Americans are doing thing. At which, I mean, Italian genre cinema has been guilty of that for a long time, but he often did his own thing, but at times he certainly was like leaning into US popularity. That's probably the other reason that it stars Donald Pleasance and Jennifer Connelly.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. I would say, I mean, this movie, this was my first time watching it. Fucking 2 hours long. Argento.
It has great kills. The spear like through the back of her head.
Yes. No. Again, the kills. So yes. Oh, it's always fantastic. I get that. But what I found was interesting, I think the second time we do hear that Iron Maiden song is closer to the end when she's getting her revenge. And looking back at the movie and thinking about metal and horror, and like we said at the beginning of this broadcast, is that's for the outsiders. It's for the outcasts. It's for othered people. And she's bullied by these girls. So I feel like I get a lot of power and like boost and an empowerment through metal. And so at least that scene anyways felt very just big and grand and epic. And the metal definitely and probably only really is what made that happen, but it definitely gave that whole moment a big boost, because here we have bringing in Iron Maiden, heavy metal, elements of like the power metal, but power truly is being given to this, and metal is power. And I kind of liked that moment in the movie. And Jess made this really great note in this research that we did, but it was like giving her courage in the face of evil, right? It's, so much like heavy metal and power metal is all about fighting demons, and it gets a little like fantastical, but whether it's metaphorical or literal demons, metal can give us that inspiration and that power to fight our inner demons, our actual demons, our metaphorical demons.
Yeah, I'd also say that even though they kind of mess up the character connection with the first time that you hear it, because it is over the killing and not her, even that track that I believe is called Sleepwalking, the Claudio Simonetti track that plays over her little insect visions. At the end title, they play that to its fullest. And if you wait until near the ending of it, they bring in like it's a glam metal riff on guitar and drums.
Cool.
So there was definitely metal influence on the track that was literally her theme as well.
Well, it's like they said, like both horror and metal, they explore the darker elements of society. Like, Kelly was saying, from death, we like in phenomena has all kinds of these darker elements in society within it. We're dealing with death, we're dealing with psychosis, unfortunately deformity, horrible things happening to people, and then insects, because everyone often thinks insects are gross and weird and don't want anything to do with them. But I'm trying to think, I'm thinking about like some metal music videos that I watch, and also insects sometimes are in those music videos to kind of show the death and decay and stuff like that. So it's like, this is what I always enjoy about the connection between horror and metal music, is they're able to bring these things together and display these kind of darker elements of society that don't often get talked about or engaged with, or explored, or and like Kelly, and then also too be empowering for people, empowering for the outsiders, the truth seekers, rebellion and going forward and moving ahead, but being inspired as we do that.
Yeah, I'd agree with that.
my little diatribe, I'm like, yes, horror, metal.
Yeah, yay. And so because I've found this connection, I was really curious on your thoughts, Colin. Is that so? Italy loves metal, metal loves Italian horror. Why do you think that is?
Yeah, so this is something I've certainly thought about a lot in the past, and I think it's connected to the exact same thing about being an outsider. Going back to this idea that Italian genre cinema was often leaning towards what Americans were doing. At the same time that that's true, it often gets dismissed as just imitative imitative of American cinema. But then if you wait until later, it obviously wasn't just imitative, because so many things from Italian horror later influenced American horror. Like when they created the entire visual language that became slasher, that obviously wasn't imitative of American cinema, because none of that existed as a visual language. And then the Americans took it to create slasher. And the same thing can be said of post Giallo stuff that people like Lucio Fulci were doing, a lot of his like supernatural horror stuff, the visual elements of that were adopted by American filmmakers later on and are still referenced by American filmmakers. So I think it is like this, it's connected to the same feeling of being on the margins, of being an outsider from the mainstream.
Especially because I also find that Italian cinema, while they're trying to do what Americans were doing, but they're also trying to push the boundaries and being like, well, we could also go a little further than what you can do. Because we often get a lot of exploitation films that are coming out of Italy. Like, when Kelly and I, we did our Nunsploitation month. And there was actually quite a few Italian filmmakers who were making these films. But they can push those boundaries, and even if they're imitating a bit, they can push the boundaries. And I feel like metal music does the same thing, whether, you're a band from Europe or North America, you can imitate something, but you can also still kind of keep pushing those boundaries. And I love the fact that, it gets embraced, because I often feel that, like, I don't know, sometimes I feel here in North America, like metal music isn't always as embraced as it is over like in Europe. Like it's just, like Kelly said, love Italians love metal. We've got we've got Wacken over in Germany. Like you've got all these major shows that are happening all the time. And here in North America, we're just like, please come this way. We need more. And it's kind of the same with also like the movies. Like you get some really good movies over in Europe, ones that really push those boundaries and stuff like that. And usually we're like, okay, we really want to see this, but we don't always have access to it.
Right. Yeah,
Mhm.
and I think also metal ends up getting treated similarly in terms of it's operating outside of the mainstream, but the mainstream will often co-opt things from metal and make it part of like pop music without
Mhm.
crediting.
Yeah.
Yeah, that is very true. Yeah.
Yeah.
And speaking of like operating outside of the mainstream, bath bomb. Do you want to give us any more information about bath bomb? Anything upcoming in terms of news? Any kind of like
Yeah, where are
hints
we
or
at?
hints or clips? Or my biggest question too is like, what was your like what inspired bath bomb? Like just boom.
I was at a film festival in Provo called Film Quest, which is a genre festival, a prominent one, and they have an event called Filmmaker Speed Dating,
Okay.
and so you have a very limited amount of time to kind of pitch a project to somebody. And I met a screenwriter there, a queer screenwriter based in Mexico City, named Michael Clifton, and we didn't pitch a project that either of us were like, let's work on that, but we knew that we liked each other. And so he sent me a bunch of unproduced screenplays that he had. And he had one that at the time was 1 page, so intended to be a 1 minute short, but only because he had written it for a 1 page screenplay competition. And it wasn't explicitly Giallo, but I was looking for something that could be turned into Giallo, and it had elements that could be expanded into Giallo. So together we expanded it from the 1 page to the 5 pages. And then I have a friend, Ronnie Exley, who's also a colleague. He runs Psycho Las Vegas, the festival,
Okay.
and he's now dipping his toe into the film world. And we were looking for something that we could collaborate on. So we did this, and it's the first step in a series of queer Giallo projects that we have planned. The next one
Oh,
is
Cool.
a queer Giallo anthology and feature, and then 2 proper features after that, potentially 3. And we the idea is to try to keep kind of like the core team that we put together for Bath Bomb.
mhm.
There's on a lot of information on the Indiegogo campaign, but we have like a pretty cool core team that was miraculously assembled. Our cinematographer Jeremy Benning is a queer cinematographer of some note. He created the look for and was the main cinematographer for all 6 seasons of The Expanse. He
Oh
also
wow.
did 2 episodes of Guillermo del Toro's Cabinet of Curiosities, including
Oh, okay.
Anna Lily Amirpour's episode.
Oh,
Um,
that was so
Nice.
good.
the one with the screen. Yeah, he was nominated
Yeah.
for an American Society of Cinematographers Award for that. He also has shot The Boys, and he just finished shooting. They're doing a series version of the Alex Cross novels, the
Okay.
Patterson novels that like Kiss. They were movies in the '90s, like Kiss the Girls and Long Kiss.
Oh yeah.
Oh, yes.
Morgan Freeman was playing Alex
Yeah.
Cross. Yeah, it's going to be a series now, and he just shot the first season of that, and then did Bath Bomb.
Well, it sounds
Great.
like a fun passion project. That's
Yeah,
what I'm hearing is that people come together, you appreciate Giallo, appreciate queer horror, and appreciate just horror in general and metal. Let's kind of bring it all together.
there won't be metal in it though.
That's true. That's true.
Yeah, the score is being composed by some non-metal people. It's Teresa Wayman from Warpaint, and her brother Ivan. So yeah, and it's gonna be like the Ennio Morricone side of Giallo.
Oh, nice.
So
Well,
like
this
experimental
Cool.
jazz type stuff.
nice.
Mm-hmm.
Well, the soundtracks to a lot of Giallo films are gorgeous anyway. Like we all
Mm-hmm.
like I know I
Yeah.
appreciate all the soundtracks to any of the films, like because of
Yeah.
all the
Yeah.
Well, we're thinking of getting some bands to do remix type or reimaginings of the
Mm.
theme song for when we do the vinyl release of the score, and that in that we're leaning into metal for sure.
Okay, cool. I like that.
Excellent.
So now that you've completed it, well, you've completed filming, you're now got to edit and do
Mhm.
all the behind the scenes stuffs. But when will people like when do you will move it to the festival circuit first and
Yeah,
then
yeah.
okay,
So either late this year or early next year, depending on what we get into. We'll be targeting like premiere festivals first, and then
perfect,
to try to do smaller festivals after that.
excellent. That's
Great. Can't wait. Should be really great. It's really exciting for you. I know the work is going to be nonstop, as it has been. I don't know, Jess. I don't think we have any questions, but the floor is now open for audience questions. So, folks out there, if you do have questions for Colin here, please bring them in. Please send them in now. And if not, we'll just wrap up. But I didn't see anything coming in. But if there's any burning questions about metal, horror, Giallo, combination, bath bomb, folks, let us know. But yeah, this was great. It's all very exciting. Giallo expert. Yes.
Is that
I own
what
Tenebrae.
Kelly?
Because that's one I really like. Love Tenebrae, actually. Yes.
Yeah, that's like one of the first meta horror movies, because the protagonist is intended to be Argento responding to criticisms of his own work through that character.
Oh, didn't know. Fun facts.
The kills in that movie are pretty awesome.
Ugh. And also the score. Like, oh my God.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, that is my favorite theme.
That main theme was made or sampled too much popularity by Justice in the song Phantom.
Oh.
I don't know if you know that track, but it's an electro house track that is pretty much just that theme with a stronger kick, like 808 kick added to it.
Well, I'm pretty obsessed with it, and I do love that movie and the score. Yeah, not much for Argento has hit me. We're just gonna shoot the shit for a second while we see if there's any questions. But sure. Yeah, Argento, I've seen a bunch of his movies, but Tenebrae is really the only one that really struck a chord with me. Opera, Jess and I actually covered Opera, and I have been meaning to revisit it because I think I liked that one a lot, but I need to go back to it. Okay, no question. I love a comment. Really enjoyed it. Yay! Thank you, Jenna.
Thank you, Jenna.
Thank you.
A friend of ours.
Opera's interesting because it's like the first goth Giallo, which is pretty cool.
It is the blacks and the golds, and I was like, yes,
and the crows, bringing crows into.
Oh my God,
crows!
Yes,
the whole thing with the eyes, like the torch.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, that's like
I need to revisit
one of my
it.
favorites.
Have you not seen Suspiria?
Yes, I have.
And you don't like Suspiria?
No, not really.
Kelly falls asleep when she watches Suspiria. Every time she's tried to watch it with me twice and she's passed out.
Have you seen the more recent version of it?
No,
I have.
It's like the opposite movie essentially, because it's.
So I probably would like it, but it's also very long. So
yeah, but it's kind of goth-ish, and it focuses more on the dance. The idea of dance being part of a spell is pretty interesting, and it has Tilda Swinton playing 3 different roles, one of which is an elderly man, which is pretty amazing.
It's great. Like I enjoy both films. I enjoy the original Argento one because I love the colors, I love the music, I love the setup of the idea of the concept with the 3 mothers and stuff like that. Like, and I just don't like how it ends, and I'm like, well, I want more. Like, and obviously we know we've got the other films that come later, but we don't really get into that. Whereas I appreciate kind of the reimagining that was done with the 2018 one. You get more of the mythology and more of the idea behind it. But you're right, it definitely focuses more on the dancing. The soundtrack was done there by the lead singer of Radiohead. Yeah, so it's like I feel like it's like a more melodic, like it's a rainy day movie, but it's like also really cool,
It's funny, he switched his 90s musicians now in more of a metal direction too, because the last one, Bones and All, was Trent Reznor and Atticus Ross, and then the one that he's releasing this year with Zendaya and whoever else is in it is also Trent Reznor and Atticus Ross.
Wow.
Yeah.
How hip.
Yeah, but yeah,
It'd be nice if you were doing so well that you could just have all your favorite 90s musicians score your movie.
Love the
And, like,
90s. Yes.
And not small
Right?
ones either, like the biggest,
Yeah,
the coolest people from the 90s. Like, hello?
Yeah.
All right. Well, it looks like there's no more questions, but so we'll wrap ourselves up here. Thank you so much, Colin, for joining us today. Where can everybody find you and Bath Bomb on social media? What kind of stuff would you like to plug as we close out this evening?
All of Bath Bomb's social media is just at Bath Bomb Horror. And the website is also bathbombhorror.com, which redirects you to the Indiegogo campaign. I only use Instagram, and it's just my name, Colin G. Cooper, all one word. No periods. None. I don't even really use it that much, so but it's there.
Excellent. Well, folks, we're the Spincers of Horror. You can find us on social media through our name, Spincers of Horror. So shout out to everybody who came out tonight, joined us. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. This will be uploaded automatically onto YouTube within the next 24 hours. Again, we're the Spincers of Horror. Thank you so much, Colin. We want to say, remember, folks, metal is power, metal never surrenders, and metal never dies. See you next time.
Thank you, everyone. Bye.
Bye.